Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. All braiding wicked waxworks. Chapter 1: The Grand Unveiling. Holly Arnold stood before the towering double doors of the old braiding wax museum, the wind from the Isle of Wight whipping through her hair. Today was the day she had worked tirelessly toward the grand unveiling of her latest exhibit. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the cobbled streets, and a sense of unease crept into her heart. The Wax Museum, a centuries-old establishment, had long been a staple of the island's eerie charm. Holly had taken over as curator 5 years ago, determined to restore the museum's reputation and bring in new visitors. The new exhibit, notorious and monstrous, was her most ambitious project yet. It featured lifelike wax figures of infamous criminals and legendary monsters from history and folklore, each meticulously crafted to perfection. As she pushed open the heavy doors, the flickering lights inside cast eerie shadows on the walls. The figures, shrouded in darkness, stood in silent anticipation. Holly's assistant, Mark, was already inside, making final adjustments to the lighting. "Everything set?" Holly asked, her voice echoing in the vast hall. "All good to go," Mark replied, a hint of nervous excitement in his voice. "This place gives me the creeps, though," Holly smiled, patting him on the back. "That's the point. We want our visitors to feel the chill of history's darkest figures." As the clock struck 7, the first guests began to arrive. Holly welcomed them with a smile, leading them into the exhibit hall. The figures were unveiled one by one, each greeted with gasps and murmurs of awe. "Over here we have Jack the Ripper," Holly announced, gesturing to a menacing figure cloaked in shadows. "And this is Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess." The guests moved through the exhibit, faces pale with a mix of fascination and fear. Holly watched with pride, her heart swelling with the success of the night. But as the last figure was unveiled, a grotesque creature known only from legend, the Jersey Devil, she felt a strange, cold breeze sweep through the hall. Chapter 2: The Awakening. The exhibit was a hit, drawing crowds from far and wide. But as the days passed, Holly began to notice odd occurrences. Visitors reported feeling watched, and some even claimed the figures' eyes followed them. At first, Holly dismissed these as mere tricks of the light and overactive imaginations. But then the real horror began. One night, as she was locking up, Holly heard a faint whisper echoing through the halls. She froze, listening intently. The whisper grew louder, turning into a chilling chant. Her heart pounded as she followed the sound, leading her to the Jersey Devil exhibit. The wax figure stood eerily still, but the air around it seemed to shimmer with a dark energy. Holly's breath caught in her throat as she reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold wax. Suddenly, the figure's eyes snapped open, glowing with a malevolent light. Holly stumbled back, terror gripping her. The figure stepped off its pedestal, its movements unnaturally smooth. The chant grew louder, the air thick with an oppressive force. Holly turned to run, but the doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. The other figures began to stir, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light. Holly's mind raced, trying to comprehend the impossible. The waxworks were coming to life, and they were not friendly. "Help!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. The figures advanced, their expressions twisted into malicious grins. Holly backed into a corner, her heart pounding in her chest. The Jersey Devil reached out, its cold, waxy fingers brushing against her skin. A sudden surge of energy coursed through her, and she felt a strange connection to the figures. "Join us," the Jersey Devil hissed, its voice echoing in her mind. Holly's vision blurred, and she felt herself being pulled into a dark abyss. She fought against the force, but it was too strong. Just as she was about to succumb, a blinding light filled the room. The figures recoiled, their glowing eyes flickering out. Holly collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The light faded, and the figures returned to their lifeless state. Trembling, she pulled herself up and stumbled out of the exhibit hall. Chapter 3: The Dark Secret. Holly knew she had to uncover the truth behind the waxworks. She delved into the museum's archives, searching for any clues. Hidden in a dusty old tome, she found a journal belonging to the museum's founder, Dr. Alistair Brading. The journal detailed Brading's obsession with the occult and his experiments in infusing his wax figures with the souls of the damned. He believed he could control them, harness their power for his own gain. But something had gone terribly wrong. The figures had turned against him, and in a final desperate act he had sealed them away, hoping no one would ever unleash their evil again. Holly realized with a sinking feeling that she had unknowingly broken the seal with her new exhibit. The figures were waking up, and their dark power was growing. She had to find a way to stop them before it was too late. As night fell, Holly gathered supplies, candles, salt, and a ceremonial dagger. She returned to the exhibit hall, the air thick with tension. The figures stood silently, their eyes closed, but she could feel their malevolent presence. Drawing a circle of salt around herself, she lit the candles and began to chant an incantation she had found in Brading's journal. The air crackled with energy, and the figures began to stir. "By the power of light, I bind you," Holly intoned, her voice steady despite her fear. "Return to your slumber and harm no one." The figures advanced, but the salt circle held them at bay. Holly continued the chant, her voice growing stronger. The Jersey devil howled in rage, but its movements were sluggish, as if an invisible force was pulling it back. With a final, powerful word, Holly thrust the dagger into the ground. A blinding light erupted from the circle, enveloping the figures. They writhed and twisted, their forms dissolving into shadows. The light grew brighter, and with a deafening roar, the figures were pulled back into the darkness from which they had come. The light faded, and the exhibit hall fell silent. Holly collapsed, exhausted but victorious. She had sealed the figures away once more, but she knew the battle was far from over. The dark secrets of old Brading Wax Museum would always linger, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to uncover them. Chapter 4: The Final Confrontation. Weeks passed, and the museum reopened, the cursed exhibit dismantled and replaced with more benign displays. But Holly couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. She continued to study Brading's journal, hoping to find a permanent solution to the dark forces that haunted the museum. One stormy night, as she pored over the ancient text, a chill ran down her spine. The air grew cold, and the lights flickered. Holly's heart raced as she sensed a familiar presence. The Jersey devil had returned, its malevolent energy seeping through the walls. Determined to end the nightmare once and for all, Holly armed herself with the ceremonial dagger and hurried to the exhibit hall. The storm outside raged, thunder rumbling and lightning illuminating the darkened museum. As she entered the hall, she saw the figures of the Jersey devil and other notorious criminals flickering in and out of sight, their ghostly forms barely contained. She knew she had to act quickly. With the journal clutched tightly in one hand, she began drawing a larger, more intricate salt circle, encasing not only herself but also the central part of the exhibit. She placed the candles at precise intervals, their flames wavering in the chill air. Holly's breath came in short, sharp bursts as she felt the oppressive force of the entities closing in on her. "By the power of light, I bind you," she chanted again, her voice shaking but resolute. "Return to your slumber and harm no one." The room seemed to darken further, the figures solidifying and advancing toward her. The Jersey devil, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent, led the charge. Holly held up the dagger, the blade catching the candlelight. "Return to the darkness from which you came," she cried, her voice echoing through the hall. The figures hesitated, their forms wavering. The Jersey devil snarled, a sound that resonated with pure malice. It lunged at her, but the salt circle held it back, crackling with energy as it touched the barrier. Holly continued to chant, her voice growing louder, more commanding. She could feel the power of the incantation building, the light from the candles intensifying. The Jersey devil howled in frustration, its form flickering like a dying flame. With a final, desperate effort, Holly raised the dagger and plunged it into the ground within the salt circle. A surge of energy exploded outward, a blinding light that filled the room. The figures screamed, their voices merging into a cacophony of agony and rage. The light enveloped them, pulling them back into the darkness. When the light faded, the hall was silent. The wax figures were once again lifeless, their eyes closed and their forms still. Holly fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. She had sealed the entities away, their dark power contained. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. In the days that followed, Holly dismantled the notorious and monstrous exhibit, replacing it with more benign historical displays. She shared the story of the cursed Waxworks with a few trusted colleagues, ensuring that the knowledge would not be forgotten, but also would not tempt anyone to repeat her mistake. The old braiding wax museum continued to draw visitors, its eerie charm intact but its darkest secret safely hidden. Holly resumed her duties as curator, but she remained ever vigilant, the journal of Dr. Alistair Braiding always close at hand. Though the figures were once again lifeless, Holly knew that the forces she had battled were not truly gone. The museum, with its long history and connection to the occult, would always be a beacon for the supernatural. But she was prepared, ready to face whatever darkness might arise. As she walked through the museum one quiet evening, Holly paused before the sealed door of the former exhibit hall. She felt the chill, but it no longer filled her with fear. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The old braiding wax museum was her domain, and she would protect it from the shadows that lurked within. Outside, the storm had passed, and the Isle of Wight lay peaceful under a clear, starry sky. Holly took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm and determination. The battle between the living and the dead was over, for now, but she knew that the story of old braiding wicked waxworks would continue, whispered in the dark corners of the museum, a testament to the enduring power of light over darkness. Chapter 6 Whispers in the Dark. Months turned into years, and the old braiding wax museum flourished under Holly's stewardship. The notoriety of the cursed exhibit faded into local legend, whispered among the island's residents but never openly discussed. Visitors marveled at the museum's historical exhibits, unaware of the dark events that had once transpired within its walls. Holly's life found a new rhythm, but she remained ever watchful. The journal of Dr. Alistair Braiding never left her office, a constant reminder of the past and a precaution for the future. She continued to study its contents, seeking to understand the full extent of the dark forces that had nearly consumed her. One rainy evening, as Holly was closing up the museum, she noticed a flickering light coming from the basement. Frowning, she grabbed a flashlight and headed down the narrow stairs. The basement was a labyrinth of old displays and storage crates, filled with artifacts from the museum's long history. At the far end of the basement, she found the source of the light, an old lantern, burning with a ghostly flame. Beside it stood a figure, hunched and cloaked in shadows. Holly's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to approach. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. The figure turned slowly, revealing the weathered face of an elderly man. His eyes glinted with a strange, otherworldly light. "Dr. Braiding?" Holly gasped, recognizing the face from portraits she'd seen in the journal. The man nodded slowly. "You have done well, Holly Arnold," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. But the darkness never truly vanishes, it merely waits. Holly took a cautious step forward. "What do you want?" Dr. Braiding's spectral form seemed to waver. "I sought to harness the power of the waxworks to control the malevolent spirits, but I was a fool. You have seen their true nature. I've sealed them away," Holly said, her voice firm. "They can't hurt anyone now." Braiding shook his head. "The seal is only temporary. Their power grows with each passing year. You must find a way to destroy them permanently." Holly clenched her fists. "How?" The old man's form began to fade, his voice growing distant. "The journal holds the key. There is a ritual, one that I never dared attempt. It is dangerous, but it is the only way." With that, Dr. Braiding disappeared, leaving Holly alone in the dim light of the basement. She felt a renewed sense of urgency and determination. She had to find the ritual and put an end to the malevolent spirits once and for all. Chapter 7 The Final Ritual. Holly spent the next few weeks poring over the journal, deciphering the cryptic notes and ancient symbols. The ritual was complex, requiring rare ingredients and precise incantations. She sought help from local historians and occult experts, gathering the necessary items and preparing for the final confrontation. On the eve of the summer solstice, Holly was ready. She had chosen the old church ruins on the outskirts of the Isle of Wight, a place of ancient power that she hoped would amplify the ritual's effectiveness. Mark, her loyal assistant, insisted on accompanying her despite the dangers. The night was dark and moonless as they set up the ritual circle, placing the candles, herbs, and ancient artifacts in their designated spots. The air was thick with tension, and an eerie silence enveloped the ruins. Holly began the incantation, her voice steady and strong. The air shimmered with energy, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet. As she recited the final words, a blinding light erupted from the circle, illuminating the ruins. The malevolent spirits, drawn by the ritual, appeared around them, their forms twisted and horrifying. The Jersey Devil, Jack the Ripper, Elizabeth Bathory, and countless others emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with hatred. Holly held her ground, continuing the chant. The light from the circle intensified, forcing the spirits back. The air crackled with energy as the spirits writhed and twisted, their forms beginning to dissolve. But the spirits fought back, their collective will challenging the ritual's power. The ground shook violently, and the candles flickered dangerously. Mark stepped forward, joining Holly in the chant, his voice lending strength to the incantation. With their combined power, the ritual reached its climax. The spirits howled in agony as the light consumed them, their forms disintegrating into nothingness. The air grew still, and the ruins fell silent once more. Holly and Mark collapsed to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. The malevolent spirits were gone, their dark power vanquished. The old braiding wax museum and the Isle of Wight were finally free from their curse. Chapter 8: A New Dawn. In the aftermath of the ritual, Holly felt a profound sense of peace. The museum continued to thrive, its dark past now a distant memory. Holly and Mark formed a deeper bond, their shared experience forging an unbreakable connection. Holly remained the vigilant curator of the old braiding wax museum, but now she could look to the future with hope. She continued to study the journal, not out of fear, but out of respect for the history and power it contained. The Isle of Wight, with its rich history and eerie charm, remained a beloved destination for visitors. The legends of the cursed waxworks faded into folklore, a reminder of the island's mysterious past. And so, as the sun rose over the tranquil island, Holly Arnold stood on the museum steps, gazing out at the world with a renewed sense of purpose. The battle between the living and the dead was over, and she had emerged victorious. The old braiding wax museum was a place of history and wonder, and Holly was its guardian, forever vigilant against the darkness that lurked in the shadows. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.